With the recent release of Minas Tirith, the excitement for us LEGO Lord of the Rings fans is real, but this release also highlights a growing issue with the theme. The small sets are all gifted purchases, and everything else is an expensive display piece. Today I want to break down what went wrong, why LEGO won't release a full wave of sets, and whether there's any hope for the future of the theme. To understand how we got here, we need to quickly look at the history of the theme. LEGO Lord of the Rings launched in 2012 alongside the Hobbit movies and received multiple waves of sets through 2014. But by 2015, both themes were completely discontinued. While we don't know the exact sales numbers, it's possible LEGO viewed the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings as one combined theme and therefore decided not to renew the license after the Hobbit films, and in turn, Hobbit sets underperformed with many fans. The Hobbit movies were hyped up for a bit, but quickly fell flat for a lot of fans. Unlike the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, they didn't have the same lasting impact. If you look at something like Star Wars, LEGO continues to make sets based on new movies and shows, but they also constantly revisit the original trilogy because those films remain popular decades later. Lord of the Rings feels similar. The original trilogy has proven its longevity, while interest in the Hobbit films faded fast. Whatever the exact reason, LEGO decided not to renew their contract and the theme disappeared for nearly a decade. Around 2020, prices of the old sets and minifigures started rising rapidly, and more fans began hoping for a revival. Fast forward to 2023, and we finally got Rivendell along with a new Brickhead set. Most people assumed this was the start of a full theme revival. Instead, the following years gave us big display sets like Barad-dûr, the Shire, Minas Tirith, their respective gifted purchases, and a couple of mid-range display sets. That's where the current problem begins. If you want to get into LEGO Lord of the Rings today, your options are basically a $75 display piece, a $130 diorama, or a set costing several $100s. In 2024, the Fellbeast gifted purchase sold out in less than 12 hours in some regions, proving that demand for the theme is still incredibly strong. Yet year after year, LEGO continues focusing almost exclusively on premium collector sets. What's especially strange is that the demand for Lord of the Rings has been obvious for years. Just look at the aftermarket. Before the theme returned, figures like Grima Wormtongue, Bluecoat Bilbo, and King Theoden were selling for ridiculous prices on the secondary market. Some of the old sets had doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled in value. That doesn't happen when nobody cares about a theme. It happens when there's a large group of fans who want the products but can't get them anymore. To me, that should have been one of the biggest signs that there was still a huge market for Lord of the Rings. The obvious question is why they didn't go all out with the full wave. Let's go back to the comparison of Lord of the Rings with Star Wars. They're both based on culturally significant fantasy trilogies, and while Lord of the Rings doesn't quite have the same size fan base, it still has an enormous audience. There are plenty of fans who can't justify spending $650 on Minas Tirith, but would happily pick up a $20 to $25 battle pack, a small playset, or a diorama from the movies. Battle packs seem like the most obvious solution. Kids could buy them as affordable entry points into the theme, while serious adult collectors could buy multiples for army building and mock building. LEGO already has a bunch of great prints and molds thanks to Barad-dûr and Minas Tirith. A Gondor battle pack or Orc battle pack feels like the kind of product that appeals to both audiences at once. LEGO Star Wars isn't successful because LEGO only makes giant collector sets. It's successful because there's something for everyone. A kid can walk into a store and grab a small battle pack. A teenager might save up for a bigger ship, and an adult collector can buy a giant UCS set. Lord of the Rings currently skips those first two steps entirely. LEGO is basically asking people to jump straight into the deep end with a $400, $500, or $600 purchase. Minas Tirith is actually a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The set looks incredible, but think about all the scenes LEGO could have pulled from the Return of the King that would have worked as smaller sets. A siege weapon with some orcs, a small section of Osgiliath, a Mumakil encounter, a Gondor battle pack, or even some simple polybags with a small build and figure. There are dozens of scenes that could have comfortably fit into the $20 to $80 range, but instead, almost the entire budget for the theme seems to be going towards giant display models. The sets that aren't super big are gifted purchases, and while LEGO could throw them on shelves alongside including them as a gifted purchase, they don't because they want to keep that exclusivity to incentivize more people to buy the bigger set. Another possible explanation for the lack of a full wave is that Harry Potter sort of already fills LEGO's fantasy/castle slot. It seems like LEGO has replaced many of their original themes with licensed IPs. Pirates has been replaced by One Piece, Space has been replaced by Star Wars, and Castle has been replaced by Harry Potter. The problem is that Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings appeal to very different audiences. Harry Potter is generally more lighthearted and aimed at younger fans, while Lord of the Rings appeals heavily to older kids and adults who enjoy medieval fantasy. To me, those themes aren't competing for the exact same audience, although in LEGO's eyes, this might be a factor. That leads into another possible explanation explanation. LEGO may simply believe the Lord of the Rings audience is too old to support a full range of smaller playsets. Clearly, the big collector sets sell well among adults, so LEGO may not think it's worth dedicating shelf space and production resources to smaller products with lower profit margins. An issue that plays into this is that there isn't really modern Lord of the Rings media aimed towards younger audiences. We've had Rings of Power, which is targeted more towards adults and wasn't particularly well received anyway. We've also gotten a handful of video games, but they aren't really designed for kids either. That could change in 2027 with the Hunt for Golem movie. If it looks like it'll perform well, LEGO might see enough potential to justify expanding the theme beyond giant collector sets. There's also the upcoming Shadow of Past project, although we still know very little about that. Still, I'm at least semi-hopeful that we might see some Lord of the Rings sets based on these upcoming movies. Still, even if the audience is older, I don't think that fully explains the lack of smaller sets. And realistically, what kid doesn't want an army of orcs or knights in armor? Look at Star Wars battle packs. Kids buy them to play with, and adults buy multiples to army build. There's a reason LEGO keeps making them, they obviously sell. The bigger issue is that without smaller sets, you're not even giving new fans a chance to discover the theme. A kid doesn't need to have watched Lord of the Rings to enjoy a battle pack full of armored Gondor soldiers or orcs with unique weapons. They could receive one as a gift, love it, and eventually become interested in the movies, books, and larger sets. I had Pirate Ship Ambush and some loose figures as a kid, and I was completely obsessed with the theme. That's a big part of why I'm still a Lord of the Rings fan today. If today's kids never get a chance to experience LEGO Lord of the Rings, who exactly is going to be buying the massive collector sets 10 years from now? That's why I think a healthy mix of large and small sets makes the most sense for the long-term future of the theme. It creates new fans while also giving existing fans more affordable options. And it's not just kids. There are plenty of adults who love Lord of the Rings but can't justify spending hundreds of dollars on a LEGO set. A smaller set could be their introduction to the theme and eventually lead to bigger purchases down the road. There is one thing worth considering though. This may not be entirely LEGO's decision. I got a comment on my recent Minas Tirith video suggesting that the lack of smaller sets could be related to the license holder. That's certainly possible. The merchandising and toy rights are controlled by Embracer Group, and we don't know what agreements exist behind the scenes between them and LEGO. That said, I don't think this is exclusively a Lord of the Rings problem. Look at Dungeons & Dragons. We only got a CMF series and a nearly $400 set. We haven't gotten a LEGO Castle set under $100 in over a decade. Stranger Things has only received 2 sets in 8 years and both retailed for $200 or more. There are plenty of themes where LEGO seems willing to release premium collector products but not smaller sets. That's why I think LEGO itself is probably the biggest factor behind what we're seeing, but I figured it was worth mentioning. At the end of the day, I think LEGO is making a mistake. The big collector sets clearly sell, but without affordable entry points, the theme has no way to grow. New fans aren't being created, kids aren't getting introduced to Middle-earth, and even many adult fans are priced out of the theme. I'm not asking LEGO to turn Lord of the Rings into its next flagship theme. I don't need 20 sets a year. I don't need a giant marketing push. I just want to see the theme feel accessible again. There were 54 Star Wars and 38 Marvel sets released in 2025. Surely, LEGO could take a few sets out of that total allocation and see what happens. If you agree or disagree with me, let me know in the comments. And if you're a LEGO Lord of the Rings fan, consider subscribing because I'll be showing off some custom armies and building some mocks in the coming weeks. As always, thank you for watching.